see, we have 8.1 miles of North Country Trail through Berry County state game areas. Out of 120 of our total miles and 47 miles in Berry County. So we have a fair amount that are on your state game.
Yep.
So I walk through them and I see a lot of trees. I see very few animals, but that's probably because I'm talking to JP when I'm on the trail. Or he's talking to me. So tell me, if you would, about state game areas.
Okay, so we have state game areas all over the state, but most of them reside in southern Michigan. They have a sole purpose of providing habitat for wildlife and for recreational opportunities for wildlife and outdoor activities. As long as those outdoor activities don't interfere with the primary objectives of providing habitat for wildlife and for outdoor, those hunting and fishing recreational type opportunities. So obviously there's some outdoor sports that would, counteract that. So in accordance to some of our federal regulations, we can't allow those things.
Okay.
So these areas were formed, I think, back in the 40s and 50s. Some of our days go back to. Some of the lands were purchased, a lot of the lands were purchased with what's called PR funding. That's Pittman-Roberts, and I don't know if people know about Pittman-Roberts, but it's a taxation on hunting and fishing equipment before it ever hits the store floor. So when it comes from the manufacturer, it's taxed right when it comes out the door. And that money goes into coffers for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It's then redistributed through the states based upon things like hunter license, sales, other funding that you can put for match, and there's a few other factors. I don't get really big into some of the funding sources.
You don't need to, do you?
But yeah, but those funding sources were used for purchasing a lot of those properties, and Berry in particular was purchased with almost all Pittman-Roberts funds, which makes it unique in the fact that, when we do so, it's like signing a loan on a bank, with a bank, and you basically state that these are activities that you will not allow on the state game area. And go back to talking about some of those activities that interfere with your primary objectives, and so things like ORVs are not allowed on Berry State Game Area. We do not allow mountain bikes off from roads. Like if it's on an open road right of way, then it's open for bicycles. Obviously there's, some enforcement stuff that we always are working on. I'm sure you guys run into it on your trails as well.
Yeah, well, this is news to me about mountain bikes not being allowed.
Yeah, they're not allowed behind, not allowed behind any of the gates where our service drives or any of our personal access for equipment and stuff is. But they have to stay to those road right of ways basically. None of the horse trail, the North Country Trail, any of those trails are open.
Okay.
So, and then
I don't remember seeing very many no bike signs at those entrances, but
we've put some in some places.
And then they got shot up by the
Signs are always high in maintenance, and that's one of the big struggles for us to be covering. So I cover Berry, Eaton, and Calhoun County, and then we also have a small chunk of property in Kalamazoo property. So we have 8 game areas in total.
You're responsible for 8?
8 game areas, yes.
Oh, wow.
We have 27,000 acres that we manage. And then, we're responsible for everything that goes, with that, all public land matters, all maintenance, all habitat, everything. And then outside of that realm, we're also responsible for disease issues, disease response, public wildlife conflicts.
You're basically trying to take care of the land that is your responsibility.
Yeah.
To keep it healthy for the animals and the plants that are in it.
Also on the private aspect of things, we have responsibilities, anything that's basically wildlife related for those counties. So.
You have trails. North Country Trail doesn't involve anything other than Berry County then for the 8 that you have, I think, right? Or
we have the North Country Trail through Berry.
yeah.
We also have, it goes through Middleville a little bit as well.
Right.
We we have a snowmobile trail that cuts through Middleville a little bit, and then we have the Horseman's Trail that cuts through part of Berry.
I was talking Berry County, you're talking Berry State Game Area.
Berry State Game Area.
Yeah.
But I'm not responsible for anything on private land outside of wildlife. So wildlife related issues, if somebody's having crop damage, if they're having, you know, issues with turkeys, or, you know, maybe you've got an aggressive swan, or, you know, geese issues on your lake, all those things come to me.
Are they supposed, I mean, wait, if I live on a lake near a state game area, I could be calling you and you'd say, that's not my problem?
No, no, that is my problem. If you have a problem with swans, I have to try to mediate that, give you alternatives. We'd be coming up with a management, you know, of objectives of potentially hazing the geese, potentially doing, getting you a permit for egg and nest destruction. We no longer can capture and transport geese because of the avian influenza issue. But at one time, like some private properties, not as much here on the west side of the state, the east side of the state where there was a lot of urban areas, they were actually paying contractors to capture those geese and relocate them in new places. And some of those were game areas. So.
This has already taken a twist that I never expected, so. So what percentage of your time do you think is dealing with private property issues like that?
Oh,
Some of your biggest headaches, probably.
oh yeah, probably 25%. Probably
Really?
dealing with private land issues, yeah. Private land conflicts, especially right now because it's crop growing season and everybody's calling that they've got goose damage and deer damage.
How about sandhill cranes, as long as I'm, one of my favorite birds, but I know farmers hate them.
There's a great thing about sandhill cranes, I'm not responsible for them. They're federally migratory birds that we do not manage, we do not have, so swans and geese, we've been given a special permit through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to handle them because there's so many complaints they can't handle them all. We do not have, thankfully, we do not have that permit for cranes, so I can just say, call U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So they handle that.
How big a staff do you have?
There's 3 permanent people.
Okay.
In my last 15 years, I think 5 of those I've been fully staffed.
With 3?
With 3.
And you're fully staffed now?
Fully staffed right now, but we have a hiring freeze, so if somebody was to leave, and that's not uncommon for the state to go through these freezes, money issues, all kinds of stuff. Right now, there's some politics and stuff behind it as well as money
Sure.
issues. There's always politics, right?
Yeah.
And then, so if somebody left tomorrow, we would, you know, if they got a job on the other side of the state and said, that's my dream job, I always wanna go there.
Sure.
They get it. We several years without somebody.
How long have you had your job?
I took this position, 2012, I think, 2013.
Okay. And moved up through the ranks, or did you get hired in as a?
No, I actually started, interestingly enough, I started, as a seasonal for parks. And I was a seasonal for wildlife at Berry State Game Area.
Okay.
Then after I graduated college, I worked for the county parks. And then I worked for Pigeon River State Forest for the Forest Management Division. And then I took a position with wildlife at Crane Pond. I don't know if you're familiar with that, down by Cassopolis.
Okay.
Or, Cass, you know, south of Marcellus, Jones, I guess, is the closest town.
Okay, yeah.
Worked there for about 5-6 years, and then I came back to Berry.
Okay. And you live near Moville, I know.
I do. I grew up in the Vermontville-Nashville area, and I'm actually living in my father-in-law, or my grandpa's farmhouse right now.
You're gonna stick this out with Berry State Game Area and this area as much as you can, right?
Yeah, I've got 28 years in, so I'm not going anywhere now, so.
Okay.
Berry was actually my dream job to get to, and because people work their whole careers there, and you only have 2 or 3 positions, the likelihood of ever getting into an office that you wanna work in is low.
Yeah.
So, you know, people have to have a lot of flexibility on where they're gonna work, if they really want. Nobody works for the department because they wanna get rich, I'll tell you that, because you're not gonna make a ton of money. You're gonna work, in odd locations and do ridiculous amount of things to have a job there.
So what is your work schedule now as far as Monday through Friday, or pretty much just to make sure you get the work done that needs to be done?
I'm on a flex, which is nice.
Yeah.
I do typically work 7 to 3:30-ish. There are days like, oh, I got something going, I'm gonna come in at 8, I'm gonna work till 4:30, and that's great to have that flexibility. We do work some weekends, some afternoons, like doing something like this, but we'll do, we might be doing a presentation on deer management for the city of Battle Creek. We might be doing a career day. I try to limit the career days a little bit, just because if you go there, you wanna make it worth your while, right? Like,
Sure.
you wanna be talking to juniors, seniors, young men and women that are ready to go out in the career force and actually interested in what you have to say. I don't go to I try not to go to 4th and 5th grade career day events, because they're more interested in chasing each other around the event than they are really listening to what's going on, which is total normal, but I can only
Not
do so-
productive.
Not productive, I can only do so many places, so we try to pick and choose some of those career day events. We have done, sportsman shows and things like that. We haven't done as much of that after COVID. I don't know if the sportsman shows have died down or what has changed, but we haven't done some of those.
So to get back a little more, and I could go on for hours,
Yeah.
to get back to more of the hiking stuff, tell me about camping on the trail and when it's allowed and how we need to do that if we are a hiker or we have through hikers.
Camping is allowed from September 1st through May 15th. Technically, there's no backcountry camping. You can camp near a parking area, anywhere along the road. It doesn't have to be like right on the road, but you can be at a gateway, anything that's close like that would we consider a designated camping area. Typically, we don't want interior camping, just because we have a lot of hunting going on in the fall. I realize that probably January, February, March, we probably don't have a lot of that type of activity, but they just made the rule the way it is. So that's the way the rule is written.
Okay.
One of the big issues we're running into in January, February, March isn't so much backcountry camping, but we've had a lot of problems with homelessness and
Right.
living on the game areas and using the game areas as a place to live. And there's just a whole plethora of issues that transpire from those situations.
Yeah.
And we don't want it to become, we've seen places in other states where using campgrounds will take over an area and people can no longer utilize it as public land because they don't feel comfortable going into those situations. There's huge congregations of people living there doing things that, are
Yeah.
a little unsavory. And people just, if you try to go in there and hunt or anything, they'll chase you right out of there.
So how big a problem is camping on the North Country Trail? Do you remember ever getting any sort of a complaint or?
And I'm gonna tell you, probably if you are hiking along the trail in January and you want to stop in the middle of the pack, in the game area and put up, whatever camping structure you brought with you, which is gonna be pretty small.
Yeah.
I don't see there being an issue. Where you're gonna run into trouble is if you go.
I am recording this.
That's fine. If you go into the state game area and try to camp,
For a week at a time.
Yeah.
Possibly, or whatever.
Or even the night, like November 14th is a very bad night to camp out in the game area. The next morning is gonna be very unsettling.
But you could camp on the 16th, I think, right?
I wouldn't.
No, but when you started that off, it was a period of time from November through
Well,
May.
if you know what November 14th is, it's the day before opening fire
Right,
on deer
no,
season.
I totally understand,
Okay,
there's a lot
okay.
of drinking and partying, and you don't wanna
Well,
be
it's
out.
just a herd of people going into this,
But
into the
technically,
woods.
you could camp, no, anyway.
You can
Yeah.
camp alongside the roads just
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
I just wouldn't, I
Yeah.
wouldn't pack in.
Back, okay, I see your point.
Yeah.
Kind of brings me to another question though, that we've had to deal with, and you probably are frustrated with it. We just have the trail coming through Fish Lake,
Mhm.
and there's that big parking area, and it seems to be a dumpster for a lot of furniture and stuff like that. How can we help you? What's the policies? What do you run into, what do you do with all that crap that people report when you find, you're the ones that are responsible for hauling it out?
We are, and I do have 2 seasonal staff that do help with some of that. We may not have them next year, due to some shortfalls, but we do occasionally have that. We have a volunteer day in the spring that we do through Yankee Springs Township, and I try to map as much garbage out on the game area as possible, and we haul dumpster loads off the game area and try to clean it up, kinda like a spring cleaning. It's easier to maintain that way through the summer. A couple of things, we have a dumpster that gets dumped every Monday, and I always tell people, if you feel like you wanna go out and volunteer and pick up stuff and haul it to there, you can always use our dumpster.
Is that at your headquarters?
It is
On Norris?
On Norris Road, yeah.
Okay.
And then it's a 4-yarder, so it's limited space, but a lot of times, like, even if you bring like a big couch or something, we'll crush it with a loader or something and make it fit.
Okay.
And then, sometimes just an email is a big thing, because if you're managing 27,000 acres, you're not in every parking lot every week, like,
Sure.
you may not be there for months.
Yeah.
And if somebody drops off a chair, a week later, somebody goes, oh, I'm gonna dump my tires there, somebody else
Yeah.
dumps, and then somebody else goes, well, I can bring my couch out here, it's a good place to get rid of that couch. Pretty soon, when you show up, you
Yeah.
got 3 truckloads full.
Okay.
So those letting us know is huge, just having those feelers out. And I will say that Berry County is a great community. I mean, we get a ton of support, and I know other guys from other management areas, and they don't get that kind of support. So just the fact that we have local people that live in the area, we have volunteer groups like yourself that are willing, that care about the area tremendously, and they wanna make sure it stays
Yeah.
clean and, picked up, and so all that effort makes a huge difference.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
Well, there was a camper at Fish Lake, that was my pick for last month's hike, and we all picked a section. And we took a picture and sent it to the, I don't know, maybe it was one of the, hike people, one of the people who take care of that section.
That's our section.
Okay,
Yeah.
is that Tenter?
And
Is
we
that-
were in touch with you about, it was not just a camper, it was someone that appeared to be
Living
living
there.
there.
Is it still there?
That's my question.
Okay. I don't recall that one, 'cause I-
Hey, Joyce, have you been there recently?
We were just there on Sunday, and I didn't go that far, David did, and I said, is the tent still there? And he said, I didn't see it.
So it wasn't really right in the parking area, it must have been on down the trail a little bit?
Well,
or-
it was in the parking area.
Oh, okay.
But I think, yeah, there were 2, right?
There was only one tent when, I did my section. Jane was with me, it had a campfire going.
Yeah.
Cause I know we've had some issues in that area, and we tried to move some folks along out of Fish Lake. I don't remember if that was the ones we moved out, and that's what I was wondering if it was still there. We also work with our conservation officers, and they're huge, and like, I can make the initial, contact and let them know that they can't be there, they gotta leave, and that I'm gonna let law enforcement know, but I'm not law enforcement, I'm just, I'm wildlife, and, I handle biology, but I do in land management, but I don't do any law enforcement. So when it comes to.
And your
issues-
staff doesn't either?
My staff doesn't either, but our
Okay.
COs, our conservation officers do, and they're, excellent at helping us move those folks when they refuse to go. So they will issue citations, and they will go through the legal process to get them off the game area, 'cause they cannot live there.
They were creating quite a bit of garbage.
That is very normal in those
Quite a bit.
situations, and a lot of that garbage is not very sanitary. So
No,
be very
Jane and I-
careful if you come across those sites for cleanup, there's sharps, there's things there that you have to be cautious of.
Can you remind us about the Mississauga rattlesnakes and our obligations as far as trail maintain?
Yeah, so, Massasauga rattlesnakes, we have a, memorandum of understanding with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on Massasauga rattlesnakes. There are populations on Berry. Unfortunately, the MRO was written for like like a huge area, not just the areas with populations. So, we have to follow these standards pretty much on most of Berry and Fish Lake, and Augusta Creek. But Augusta Creek has a robust population, so that makes a little bit more sense. There is a robust population in the Great Fen of Berry. We're still exploring whether there's any at Fish Lake or some of these other locations that there's allegedly mass sites. But anyway, to answer your question is that essentially we cannot do any mechanical mowing during the active season. Once we've gotten past October, I think it's the 20th, 28th, somewhere in there, towards the end of October, I'd have to look it up. But you can essentially go back to using mechanical mowing at that point because allegedly they'll be in their hibernaculum or close to it and they'll no longer be up in the game area where you're could potentially have incidental take.
So I'm almost afraid to ask this, but Fish Lake, we were planning on doing some trimmer mowing soon because it's getting overgrown.
Yeah, and technically that would be outside that memorandum of understanding.
But you said they haven't.
But you can use hand trimming equipment. There's no restrictions on hand trimming. It's just mechanized equipment. Mostly my understanding is most of that's going to be motorized wheeled.
Okay.
So like if you have something that's mechanized that runs off motor that pulls itself forward, like
Right.
like a walk behind brush mower or a
Yeah.
tractor,
Yeah.
that's where they expect the most take. They don't, like something that was like a handheld string trimmer, I would not count.
I like that interpretation.
Okay.
So a lawnmower is no-go, right?
If it was if it's like something that's self-propelled, probably not. If it was a push type, I think you'd probably be okay. Realistically, snakes should never lay there long enough for somebody to run over it with a push lawnmower. When you're running mechanized equipment like tractors and things like that, it causes enough ground disturbance and it's moving fast enough that it can disorient the snakes, and then you could end up running over them because they just don't know which way to go. If you're running a push mower, you're not moving very fast, and I don't see. We've mowed a lot of area out there on and off throughout the different seasons. There's no snakes.
So our chapter has two trimmer mowers, which use the nylon string, which is probably yay high above and not an actual blade.
Yeah.
So I would have to say that a snake would have to raise its head and say, "What's that?"
Yeah. There is a cutting height too of 10 inches, I think, is the cutting height, so you can use some of that during that season. We have to report how much we do, but we can do some mowing with the mechanized equipment if we cut at a height over 10 inches, but.
I have a feeling if we were just talking over coffee, we would both agree that we've probably never seen a Massasauga near a trail, and probably the chances of seeing one is slim and none, but.
I would say that is correct.
We have rules and regulations that we need to.
There
Yes.
are trails at Pierce. I came across a couple in September. They're just sunning, they're doing nothing.
Yeah.
You can take a photo, well, in February, I even had, there's
Wow.
some snakes out. You can take a photo, don't get real close. But they're just ignoring you.
Oh, yeah, they're pretty docile. Most of the time, if it's during the active season and being a cold-blooded animal, obviously, if it's cold out, it's not gonna move well. This time of year, they move very, very well. They're very active. And I have never physically saw one and had it sit there and let me approach it. From 10, 12 feet, that's about as close as I got, and they boogied and went underneath brush, went down in a hole, down under cover, and they hid. They're not aggressive. They're extremely startled by people and don't want anything to do with them.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, good. What are the biggest issues that are coming up in the future or currently going on now for you in state game areas?
The same ones that always come around. I think of like, I don't know, I refer to movies a lot of times. You ever seen the movie Men in Black, where there's always this imminent danger of, the earth being destroyed? I feel like that's the DNR, and it's always two things: funding and wanting to use our state game areas for something other than what they were purposed for.
Okay.
Those are always the two big ones.
And they never seem to happen.
We have very good people at, diverting it at the last second, saving the day, so.
You got your own Men in Black movie.
We have
coming,
our
right?
own Men in Black, so they don't have the snazzy, cool outfits or any of the cool looking gear, but they end up saving us in the end, so far.
Some of our trail managers, and I'm starting to bring this to a close and then opening it up to other people, some of our trail managers who are looking at some swampy areas and want to do the reroutes, or, when you did the log clearing up in, I don't even know if that was a state game area up off of, Johnson, or Robertson, I think it might have been anyway, they did the tree clearing and there was a really erosion problem there.
Mhm.
So we're looking at doing some changes. What's the easiest, best way to work with you to do any sort of reroutes of any significance?
So-
And are we doing it now pretty well?
Yes, basically contact me. I can issue, some things I can just issue directly a use permit for, no
Okay.
big deal, like Johnson, up there in Middleville, no big deal, I can just issue you a use permit, the trail already exists, you're just doing maintenance on it,
Okay.
doing some work on it. Sometimes I don't even have to issue a use permit, I can just say, go ahead, it's part of the, MRO that we already have in place, so you can just maintain your trail. But if you needed to, we need to bring a tractor up and down that trail to get like logs in and put, water stops or spares or something like that, I can write you a use permit. If it's in the Massasauga area, found out the hard way that I have to ask US Fish and Wildlife's permission, give a very thorough explanation of what the trail is and that we're going to just use like hand equipment, not bulldozers and all this other stuff. And it's not gonna be open to vehicles and a long explanation, if you
This
will.
isn't anything that actually happened on the North Country Trail, is it?
Perhaps.
We have somebody in the audience that's squirming a little bit right now.
So I found out that sometimes, cause we do things like, that you're just gonna use a chainsaw, you're just gonna trim some of these limbs and move that trail over 5 feet, right?
Yep.
Get it out of that field so we don't have to worry about you guys plowing it up and we're, that sounds logical.
Yep.
We're not gonna hurt anything. We know we're not gonna do any harm. US Fish and Wildlife Service, finds out about it apparently through National Trail. I'm not exactly sure what the background is, but somehow or another, when you guys inventory your trails, it goes to a national database, which then gets flagged by US Fish and Wildlife Service, and then they find out we moved the trail without their consent. And then they're really upset.
Okay.
And so we try to avoid that. Try to ask it, and the next time you ask, then they take their own sweet time getting you a permit.
Sure, yes.
So if it goes through Berry, and it is a reroute, we do have to ask for their permission.
Millville too?
Middleville, no. Middleville is not
Oh,
a
because it's
Massasauga
not.
rattlesnake
Oh,
area, so
okay.
I have no, there's no federal requirements there. Like I said, for Middleville, I can issue a use permit. Now, if you were going to change the trail at Middleville, probably the only thing I would do is I would get consent through our lands office to make sure that meets our standards and that it's okay to do so.
And as I understand, we have to go through the National Park Service system anyway, and so they probably have their own procedures to check.
They probably do, but I would definitely I'd have to run it through our lands office to verify that anything that we do that way or any type of long-term agreement that we would have, cause then once it got moved, then that would be the designated trail, we'd have essentially a long-term agreement that that's where it would stay. I have to have their permission to make those types of landscape level changes.
Gotcha. Is it a good job?
It is a good job. I don't regret, going into this career choice. I think, again, it's not something you're gonna make a ton of money at, but it's very rewarding. I enjoy my work and it's always changing. There's always a challenge, there's always something different. As I've moved through the ranks, I would say the position I have today is maybe a little bit more administrative than I preferred. I always loved being in the field more, but now I have young guys that I'm getting trained to do that, so.
So what percentage of your time is in the office right now, do you think?
At least
say that with such a downcast look.
I used to come in the morning, you do a little bit of, check an email, check a couple things, and boom, you're out the door, you're getting your equipment around for the day, and you're off.
And that was before cell phones too, right?
That was before cell phones when I first started, but now, the cell phone's not the worst part. I think it's the plethora of emails that you get, and most of them, there's something attached to it, like, oh, you have to go through this training, or, oh, we need these logs in by a certain time, and, oh, we need this inspected, so you have to go do this, and send us pictures and document this, and so there's always like that, and other duties. with that.
We retired people need to hear people like you once in a while to be happy. Anybody have any questions?
So if I'm hiking down the trail and I wanna stop for the night, you said it's probably all right, but, except for hunting season, but are there any permits that you have to get ahead of time or anything like that?
Technically, technically, you get a camp permit, you can print them off at, online from DNR websites. If you're back in and you stop like late at night, and take off in the morning, chance of anybody seeing your permit's probably gonna be.
Well, I never understood that permit because it makes no sense to me that you take a piece of paper and you're supposed to hang it on your tent or whatever, and then when you're done, you're supposed to leave it there. That's what
Yeah.
it says, you leave it there with all your
So-
identifying information.
So you're
So now
supposed
you
to.
got a piece of paper out in the woods that
Yeah.
How did I know
probably,
you- how
you
did I know
guys
you?
really ever go pick them up?
We have, I'm not gonna say we get around to all of those.
Yeah.
Cause at one time, we had a lot of them, we had a lot of camps, but we also had, more people and more time to drive around and do some of that. We get to the ones that we know where they're at, and we usually just stop and talk to them, and, the main thing is like, what you're actually supposed to take the bottom the top portion with you, the bottom portion is the portion that, essentially left for us in case a mess was left. And if we get there before you leave, that's the idea, we detach the bottom portion, take it with us. I'd say that the form probably needs to be updated, but.
I can think of a number of reasons why that would make sense.
Well, I mean, my point is down here, I could see what you guys would see, but I've been up north where there's no way, when you're off trail and you're back in the woods somewhere, there's no way somebody's gonna.
There was 100,000.
Now you're leaving a piece of paper.
Yeah. With
Well,
your identification.
Randy, when you started out, you said most of the state game areas were down in southern Michigan, and I would have thought it would be just the opposite. I would have thought that it would have been more state-owned land up north, but there's would be state forest versus state game areas?
Yeah, and so there was a few, we still have a couple state game areas up north, a few. But as a rule, most of the state forest and land and personnel was up north. We had a few state forests down here. Allegan was a state forest at one time.
Yeah.
And we actually land swapped with forest management, said, hey, your people are up north and our people are down here mostly. We wanna swap properties, so we did,
Okay.
and for administrative reasons.
But it is two different agencies.
It's totally two different agencies with totally two different management strategies. Actually, there's parks, lands, there's wildlife, and there's forestry. And those are really only the big three that can own property. There are a few oddities, like DTMB may own some property, or MDOT or something like that, but.
He came in out the door saying ETMD
Oh,
or something.
yeah, sorry.
I said, you can't use
Em-
initials in here
Yeah.
with me.
Motor Transport Division obviously owns property along the highways. DTMB is Department of Management and Budget. They have a few parcels. Yeah, surprisingly, they do own a few parcels. One of them being like up by Windsor, it's actually state game area, but we don't own it. It's actually owned by Department of Management and Budget. And the reason being is they bought the parcel and with the idea that if they ever want to develop it, put new state facilities and buildings, those will be Department of Management and Budget buildings. We have a MRO with them for managing the area, but by little it's getting swallowed up by expansion from state construction. But most of the game areas were put in southern Michigan with the idea that, you know, back quite a ways, a long time ago, there was no state land opportunities.
Right.
And so if you wanted to hunt or fish or recreate that way, you had to go up north.
Yeah.
And so these properties were purchased with that idea is to provide opportunities in areas where locally there wasn't any without.
And we're glad they did.
And we're still looking at some areas, we continue to try to expand, and, not too long ago, we bought a parcel up by Potterville State Game Area, about 450 acres. And then we're looking to, find that reasonably priced chunk of property somewhere in Calhoun County where we
Yeah, that
can
would be
provide an
nice.
opportunity down there as well.
Any other questions?
Yeah, kind of the opposite of that. I live right by Yankee Springs, so I drive through your area all the time, and I wonder, as more people discover Berry County, is there, like, do people call you all the time and say, hey, can we buy this land? Or like, can I rest assured that it's protected and that it's not gonna be
Yeah.
developed?
So we're not.
Cause there's so much of it.
We will not sell a property unless there is particular reasons for doing so. So we did sell, we used to have what's called the Charlotte State Game Area. We sold that just recently. It was a 40-acre parcel. It was 200 yards wide and a half mile long. It created a lot of trespass issues. We never purchased the property originally. It was actually bought by the Department of Transportation. They built a highway through 40 acres of it and then gave us the rest, the leftover slice, which.
So you had a highway within hearing distance anyway.
Yeah, the idea was we'd then buy more parcels next to it, make it a bigger area. Well, I know the families of the farms next to it, we're not buying that in the next 100 years. So when we got Potterville, which wasn't too far away, there was 450 acres there and a lot of opportunity for expanding, we decided to dispose of that parcel. There's been a couple odd shaped parcels that we owned, like things that were a small triangle. When I say small, less than a quarter of an acre on the opposite side of a road, butted up against private land, something like that. We would dispose of and sell.
I think you're safe, Joyce.
Yeah, we're
Am
not.
I safe?
You're safe.
Are we safe?
You're safe. We're more interested in acquiring parcels. We have a projected state land boundary that we review every 10 years. It's basically a donut or a halo drawn around the game area. And inside that halo, that's kind of our expansion limit of where we figured we would ever go with a state game area. So, and they do limit us in that aspect because they only want the footprint of state land to be X amount, large percentage of an area of a county, a township, or municipality. Because one of the things, we can affect local governments in areas because we don't pay taxes, we pay money in lieu of taxes. So we do pay into the county per acre every year, but it may be not at the rate they want, especially with some of these $1 million homes and things that are coming in. Some of these are really high dollar properties, and we're not paying at those rates. So from that aspect, we can have an impact. So we want to limit, our footprint a little bit on the landscape, but we also don't want to buy parcels that don't make sense. So, if there's a 40 on one side, on the opposite side of the road for us, but right next to it's a subdivision, we're not going to pursue that for them because we don't want to be backed up to the subdivision. It just, with all the hunting and fishing aspects, we don't want to be next to that much development. Vice versa, if there's a 40 acres for sale and it's surrounded on 3 sides by state game area, we don't want that to become a development. We want to purchase that property and preserve it. So, keeping those properties somewhat contiguous is kind of a main management goal for us. So we would definitely not, if we sold a parcel, it would have to be something that's fragmented off the main part of the game area or something that doesn't make sense for us to own.
Do we have a question over here? Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about what's going on Solomon Road, all the clearing out there between Hastings and Middleville? Should be the state game area there.
Solomon Road.
Yeah, between Hastings and Middleville.
We had a harvest up there, was it last year?
Yeah.
Okay, so we do, every year we do forest inventory. All of our areas are broken into compartments. We review every stand of timber that's in that compartment. We then look through those for prescriptions for cuttings, or burning, or herbicide treatments, or maybe a combination of. Those management goals are usually wildlife related in some aspect. The Solomon we had a couple different harvests in there, and a lot of them involved aspen. And aspen is a tree that regenerates from cutting and rootstock, so it's a cloning tree. And if you don't cut it, it essentially will get outgrown by other trees, some of which are not as valuable for wildlife, like red maple. And so we always try to do those harvests so that they propagate species that have the most wildlife value. So a lot of times, like in that cutting, I would cut all aspen, I'd remove all red maple, but I might leave oaks in the diameter of 10 inches and above for acorn production. So the idea is that we would then potentially get a few more offspring of oak, we get a nice stand of aspen flush back. We're gonna get some red maple, we're not looking at eradicating, but we wanna keep the red maple to a minimum. We don't want a stand of red maple because just from a wildlife purpose aspect, it looks nice, but it's.
And Randy, if you're doing that, you're kinda doing that to feed the deer, but the deer is overpopulated, so
It's not
you can't
just-
win, right?
Yeah, it's not just deer though, a lot of these, so we look at all species. And you look at a landscape level cover type, you don't want a forest of all one age class and all one structure. It will actually extirpate certain species, and there's a plethora of songbirds that need that low foliage growth for nesting purposes and for, some of them for winter cover.
Yeah.
So, providing different stages of forest growth on the landscape level provides different types of habitat for different species. And it's not just huntable species, it's all species.
Sorry, Sean, I interrupted, I guess you guys had kinda finished up that
No,
discussion.
yeah, no, it was good.
Yeah,
I was wondering what it was about.
our biggest hurdle for that is invasive species. And unfortunately, when we do cuts, you do disturbances,
Autumn olive.
autumn olive, multiflora rose, tree of heaven, these are all species that, by all, we use some herbicides, we use some burning. You gotta pick and choose your battles with some of those.
When you do a clear cutting or cutting like that, you are getting money from a contract, you hire a contractor, they're paying you for whatever good stuff they can get out of there, I assume.
So we do all the management, we don't pay them anything, they pay
Oh,
us.
okay.
So they'll have to put a bond down,
Okay.
usually 10% of the total sale. Or 10% of the, I think it's the largest compartment of the sale, because a lot of times the sales are multiple compartments, but anyways. They have to finish the one compartment before they can pay for the next one, and so forth. When it's done, we hold that 10% bond to make sure they meet all of the standards that we've set forth. As long as they meet all those restoration standards and all the cutting standards, then they get the 10% back. But we keep the rest of the funding for the sale.
Gail, you had a question?
Yeah, in that 27,000 acres, how many lakes are there? And is fishing allowed on all the lakes? And what are the boat and motor regulations for those lakes?
I don't know how many lakes we have. I'd have to look at a map.
It's
Fishing
Michigan,
is,
so.
yeah, fishing is allowed on all of them, not all of them have fish in them. Some of these are considered lakes, they're probably a deep wetland, but they still have a lot of migratory waterfowl value. Not all of them have access, and if they do have access, they typically are limited access sites of just gravel launches. We don't, I think the only one that we have a concrete launch on was Bassett Lake. And there was it was before my day, I think there were some erosion issues going into the water. Fisheries Division didn't wanna close it, so they ended up putting the concrete structure in to prevent the erosion.
That's one of the bigger lakes?
That is one of the bigger lakes, and there is, there's boats and pontoons and stuff on that
So
lake,
then
the private sector.
can they only have trolling motors, or what is the limit on the motor?
We don't have any restrictions on any of our areas as far as, motor size.
Wow. Okay.
So, but most of them, you're mainly restricted by the access.
Yeah.
Because it's such a limited launch, there'll be people with, maybe get in there with a rowboat and a small motor, and that's about as big as boat structures you can get in the lake with.
Any last questions? Kale?
Yeah, 30 years ago, I was biking on, national forest lands, is that still legal? Trails in national forest for mountain bike?
I don't know, I don't handle any of the federal lands, so I only handle state lands, and I'm pretty, other than, with the exception of Cannonsburg State Game Area, e-bikes and, mountain bikes are pretty much illegal across all state game areas as a rule, other than roads open to the other traffic.
This is all new to me, so thank you
No,
for
not a
coming
problem.
this evening, really helpful. I'm trying to understand the state game area mindset. Is it putting boundaries around natural habitat so that the wildlife has a natural place to live? Or are you protecting a hunting area? Is the emphasis on making certain areas accessible for killing animals or protecting the
Yes.
habitat that animals wanna live in?
Answer is yes, to both. So.
So if
we
I
do
was an
both.
animal,
So
do I
we'll
wanna
buy
be in
prop-
one?
We bought well, typically, the animals we're trying to protect are not huntable species. So we'll buy properties intentionally knowing that there is a unique piece of habitat or a unique species on that property with the idea of preserving that habitat intact or preserving that particular species. We're always trying to promote box turtles, Massasauga rattlesnakes, those types, cerulean warblers, those types of animals, we want to promote them in numbers that, and in some of these areas, these are maybe their last, foothold in the world. So we try to preserve those locations. We also want to make it, being one of our other both objectives to provide wildlife habitat and to provide hunting opportunity are both top objectives of wildlife division. So huntable species, we want to provide opportunities for huntable species that are in plethora numbers, at good numbers. So white-tailed deer, turkeys, rabbits, squirrels, we want to promote and utilize, the aspect of hunting to manage those populations. So sometimes you're dealing with a surplus of animals, and so you want to provide some recreational opportunity there. Sometimes you have too few animals on a landscape, so you're not gonna provide that hunting opportunity, you're being more of a conservation mode.
And your office or your 3 people could regulate if it's deer hunting season or whatever the animal is, you could regulate in this spot that we control, you cannot hunt for these things here? In
So-
contrast to the state?
So, we really haven't had, like Massasaugas, there's no hunting season for Massasaugas, so you can't go in there and remove those things from the landscape, you can't disturb them. Can they hunt through there? Sure. Are they gonna disturb snakes? Probably not too much. Most of those habitats are gonna be utilized in the same way, in the same time frame. Deer are managed like on a landscape level, so if we had an area, let's say Berry County had too few a deer for an antlerless season, we would close antlerless season for the entire county, not just a small area of the game area. Same with turkeys and most species. Luckily, I guess good or bad, depending on which end you're standing on. We don't have issues with game species being too few. I mean,
Right.
there is some decline in turkey numbers. We're doing a lot of research into that and trying to figure out why those numbers are slightly declining.
Yeah.
It's not really harvest related because we kill very few hens. We're mainly just killing toms during the spring season.
They were very rare, and then they became very, very common, and now they're dropping off, and.
Yeah, and we don't know if that's part of a normal, a normal predator-prey surge where you introduce a new species to a wide open habitat, they got no competition, and the population just soars, and then eventually they hit a plateau, whether it be nesting success or whatever limits that population in that habitat, and they start going the other way. Then eventually they kind of come back up, and eventually they start doing this and they level out to a norm.
I'll just interject to say one of our members loves to hunt raccoons now because he says he sees so many and they're ruining the turkeys.
Raccoons do cause a fair amount of predation, and that could be, you know, one cause
Yeah.
of decline. You know, right now, the early synopsis might be death by 1,000 cuts, so we have things like avian influenza, West Nile virus,
Roadkill.
turkey pox, there's just a multitude of different things that could be. One thing that a lot of people, the silent killer that nobody talks about is lack of disturbance in forests in southern Michigan. And so there's not enough cutting on a scale of like clear cutting in southern Michigan. So a lot of these forests are now maturing and the canopy underneath is wide open and the understory is very clean along the, people call it a park-like setting. So that is very poor nesting success for a turkey. A turkey needs understory growth, they need brush and cover to hide from things like raccoons. So what happens is if you don't have adequate habitat, pretty soon predation goes through the roof, reproductive success goes down. These things are all things that influence population numbers.
Can you stick around for another 10 minutes while we take a break and ask questions that people might have?
I have one last question.
Sorry, Larry, you waited too long. Oh, go ahead.
You seen any predators down in this area, like bears or
Cougars.
cougars, wolves?
So the only cougars, despite what everybody says that we know of, are in the UP, and we get multiple sightings of those on trail cameras, and that is not the most populated area with people. We have tons of data supporting cougars here. I have 0 data for down here. We do have a breeding population of bobcats in Eaton County. I have confirmation of that. I expect that population to continue to grow. Our bear numbers were pretty steady every season with what I call migratory bears. We were seeing juvenile males coming down from up north getting pushed out of their area by adult males because of breeding territories in the spring. And we would see them for the summer, they'd hang out, maybe even over winter here. And then once they put a little weight on them, they could compete for their own area, they'd go back up north. We have since adjusted our harvest permit numbers along the southern tier counties. And the number of bear sightings I've seen during the summers has dropped almost to 0. So they've apparently created enough space and a habitat up north that I'm not seeing as many migratory bears, which I think is a good thing. I don't need giant raccoons tearing down people's aviaries and all of their sweet corn crops, and I've got enough damage, wildlife damage control problem.
Sweet corn, I'm sure.
Oh, I can only imagine what
Okay.
bears.
We are going to take a 10-minute break and then we're gonna close out the meeting. Now, when I told Randy that we tried to give a gift to each of our speakers, I said, do you have a restaurant or anything you'd like? And he immediately said, oh yes, I'd like to take I don't know if I should say his